Okay, thanks for now, Jim. Well, we heard from Neil Doncaster earlier. The SPL have passed their investigation into Rangers' use of EBTs and possible dual contracts to an independent tribunal. BBC Scotland revealed that the former Rangers striker Billy Dodds received a sum of money through an EBT as a final payment ahead of a transfer to Dundee United. Well, earlier Chris McLaughlin spoke to Billy Dodds to shed some light on what happened at that time.
At the time, I mean, it wasn't my idea. Rangers approached my advisors. They got round the table. I was due a lump sum for leaving Rangers, going to Dundee United, through what I was left in my contract. And my advisors worked out what before tax and after tax, and I got the exact amount received after tax.
I think when you were asked on Radio Scotland before, you'd said that you were paid in the normal way. Do you regret not having mentioned the EBT at that point?
Not at all. At that time, I was due what, I mean, as I said, I left it all to my advisors. I was due what I knew I was allowed out the club, which has been the case in every other club, and I got what was due. So I was a footballer getting the money I was due from a football club. So it was after tax I was paid. So I never made anything. There was no tax evasion in that.
I'm talking more about just the chat that we had on Radio Scotland about because the conversation at that point was about EBTs. I'm just wondering whether or not it would be more advisable for you to mention the fact that you did have experience of an EBT.
I mean, I probably could have come out at the time and said I have an EBT because there's nothing to hide, but I just thought at that moment, before the EBT investigation was up and running, that it was better just to say I was due an amount out the club, which I took, which there was nothing to hide, Chris. That was the point I was making.
Did you have a side contract?
Absolutely not. I mean, my advisors were approached when I was leaving Rangers, when they said that I could go to Dundee United. I only got a one-off payment. Hadn't even a clue about EBTs at the time. My advisors were approached. They knew exactly what was due before tax and after tax, and I walked away with the exact amount after tax.
We'll go into the details of that in a second, but were you aware of other players having side contracts?
No. It's one thing in the dressing room at Murray Park where nobody spoke about anything like that. EBTs weren't mentioned. It just was a no-no. You don't do that in most dressing rooms in Scottish football do that. Nobody speaks. You don't run about and say I'm on such and such a week or such and such. The players, although footballers get deemed as thick sometimes, they don't run about and tell everybody what they're on and what their wages are. It's just a no-no in football.
Okay, let's talk about your own particular EBT and the details of that. You said that was a one-off payment. Do you remember how much that one-off payment was for?
Well, I think it came out in the BBC documentary. It was for 190,000. So my advisors worked it out, and they knew that was due 190 grand, and I walked away with 190 grand.
Did your advisors or you never at any point question why Rangers wanted to pay you in this way?
You don't. Well, I didn't. I just said, look, what's happening? Am I getting my money? They said, yeah, it's all in hand. As I said, EBTs were deemed legal at that point. So I'm like, okay, we'll sign it, we'll walk away with my money, and that was it. I mean, that's the last I thought of it, Chris. Never ever thought it would come to this stage, that's for sure.
I wonder, though, in hindsight, whether or not you wish you had spoken to your advisors and said, well, obviously someone's looking to either avoid tax or not pay me in the normal manner. In hindsight, would you have investigated that further if you had known?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No, that was down to my advisor. So every deal I did at every club I went to a few, obviously. They took care of it. They advised me, and that was the end of it.
Did you believe that the EBT was a loan?
At the time, Chris, when I said that they were doing it all with my advisors, so I didn't really speak what was the content, whether it was a loan, whether it was just paperwork that my advisors agreed with Rangers, and then I went and I signed it, because all I saw at that time was what I was due. As a footballer, you go in there and you see what you're due after tax. That was the amount that I was going to get, and I signed it.
So your advisors never made you aware of the fact that this was a payment that was different from other payments that were
No,
made?
not at all. They just said to me that it's going through a trust fund and I was going to get my money. You're due, Dodds, all you're interested in is what you're due from this club. There's your money, you're getting it. That's it. So,
But someone must have been told that this was a loan because
that
the
would be my
EBTs.
advisors, but I didn't. I don't know if you know the way it works, Chris. When you're talking, you don't get into great detail. They look after you. They tell
This
you
is a
what
lot of
to
money.
do. Yeah, of course. I'm not denying that. I think I know what £190,000 is, but they look after it. I've totally trusted them in all my moves. They've been different class, and they still are to this day.
So who at Rangers advised you to take your payment in this way?
Genuinely, again, they approached. I don't know who was on the board. Obviously, David Murray was the chairman of the club at the time, and it's his word that he passes it on to the board. But I genuinely don't know who it was that approached my advisors. That is the truth of the matter. I just turned up. I let them do everything, and then I turned up and I signed the paperwork.
Can you understand though why people might think that there is a certain element of kind of hiding behind ignorance with regards to that? It might well be the way you remember it, but £190,000 people will see is a lot of money.
It is the way
Absolutely, but people will say that is a lot of money for you not to know where that money was coming from, or for your advisors not to tell you how that money was being paid.
Yeah, they told me it was in a trust fund. I mean,
but not in a loan.
What else do I have to get into detail and paragraph it? There's loads of things where I think you've got to understand the job at the time, and I think every single footballer to a man would tell you the same thing. When you're due an amount of money, tax after tax, out of a club, if you get that, you're happy, and you don't get into great detail.
So as far as you're concerned, if you're getting your cash, you're happy, and as far as you were concerned, the tax was being paid by someone. Yeah. Looking back on it now, why do you think they asked you to take your payment that way?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was a legal scheme at the time which they thought that might help them out for tax purposes. I really can't answer that because I'm not a businessman. I don't really know how it works. But if you're asking me to have a guess and hazard a guess at it, I would say that that's why they wanted to do it, because they thought they could save them some sort of tax at the time.
If indeed Rangers are found guilty of paying their players using side contracts, should they be stripped of titles?
I genuinely, and I really don't think so, because as I said to you at that time when I was leaving Rangers, I had never heard of EBTs. I've also gone over in the dressing room what it was like at Murray Park and in at Ibrox. Never spoken about. The players genuinely went out on the pitch and earned the titles, sweated blood and guts to go and try and win the titles, and I'm sure, in fact I didn't, and I didn't know about it anyway, but the players who maybe had their own EBTs at the time, they didn't even stop twice to think that we've got an EBT. They genuinely, for me, won the titles, and that should be the end of it. They shouldn't be stripped. Absolutely no.
But you can see perhaps why people would argue that if Rangers can pay these players in a way that's financially beneficial to Rangers, then they must have gained some kind of sporting advantage.
Yeah.
Not for the players. I'm not saying it's the fault of the players.
I know,
but for the club gaining an advantage.
Yeah, of course, and people will have arguments about that, and that's why the great debate will still go on. I can only tell you what it's like from a player's point of view. I can see that there was maybe a small advantage gained, but at the end of it all, you never stop to think about that as a player. You go out there and you earn and you graft to win your titles. But if there was a small advantage gained, of course it helped them. I'm not denying that, and supporters all over the country will be arguing that fact. But as a player, I'm telling you, as a coach, you don't think about it.
Well, Jim, titles could be stripped if Rangers are found guilty over this situation. Billy Dodds there thinking, though, that should not happen. Your thoughts on that?
Well, there's two distinct elements, Jane. There's the players, and you can understand that. I don't think they tried any harder because they happen to be paid by EBTs, but there's the corporate body who are responsible for these things. And the key question, I suppose, for an independent commission is, A, did it actually happen? Were the honours won according to the rules of the laws of the game? If they weren't, then it's a kind of financial doping, has been suggested. It's against the rules or laws of the game. Normally when that happens in any sport, the gold medal or the medal is withdrawn, the athlete's chucked out the competition, whether it be the Tour de France or whatever. So in that respect, it looks to me as though the titles, the honours won, may well withdrawn very hard on the players, because as I say, they wouldn't have been trying any harder because they were being paid in a certain fashion. But it's the corporate body thing that comes into this, and in that respect I would think that it may well be a case of stripping titles and honours.
Let's bring you back.